You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network live in New Hampshire. Joining us now, Chairman of the Republican Party of New Hampshire, Steve Stepanek. Steve, great to have you with us.
Well, good morning, John. This is Steve Stepanek, and I'm happy to be on your show and talk about what's going on here in New Hampshire and how we're getting ready for the President's visit on Thursday, which we are all very excited about.
Well, let's start with Steve Stepanek. You were the first elected official in America to back the Trump for President campaign. You were number one. I remember that because you had come out for the president. I was the first one in media to back him. And you were the first elected representative I had on my show to actually endorse Trump. And that was all the way back in 2015. Boy, what a long way you and I have come since those early days.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I go all the way back. I was invited, along with Bill O'Brien, by Dave Bossy, who we knew, to the Freedom Summit that they had in February of 2015. And at that time, there were 17 people who were considering running, and I was basically interviewing all the different candidates because, of course, they all wanted my endorsement in New Hampshire, first in the nation primary state, because I was one of the leading and still am one of the leading conservatives in New Hampshire. And so I met with all the different candidates and ultimately decided that if Donald Trump ran, I was going to back him because he was a business person. He wasn't your typical politician. He was completely outside the box, and I felt we needed a significant change in the way things were run. I was in '08. I was the state co-chair for Rudy Giuliani. I had supported Newt Gingrich. I had supported, in the end, Mitt Romney, and we came up short on all of those candidates. Although they were all great candidates, they were your typical politicians, and I felt the country was ready for a significant change. And at that time, Donald Trump had just hired on Corey Lewandowski, who I knew very well. I've known Corey for, going back to, earlier in this century. Corey had just been made the state director of AFP and had come to me looking for some space, and I had some office buildings that I owned in Manchester, New Hampshire. So I rented his first office space for AFP, and I've been close with Corey ever since. So Corey had just been hired on, and I, at the time I said, Corey, because there was a lot of questions as to whether Donald Trump would actually announce and whether he would actually do his financial disclosures to be president. And I said, if he does in fact announce, I will definitely endorse him. And then we go back. Corey called me. That was in, I think, February 15th of 2015. And then Corey calls me up in early March and says, Mr. Trump would like to do a meet and greet in New Hampshire. And I know you've done a number of these at your house. Do you think you could do it at your house? So my wife, Ellen, and I said, sure. And on March 19th, we had Donald Trump at our house, and Corey came in with his crew of people and moved all the furniture out of the first floor, put it in the garage, and we crammed almost 300 people and 20 news crews into the house. And at that time, that was the first and only house party that Trump did because we outgrew them immediately. I mean, the interest and excitement in Mr. Trump at the time was just over the top. And then when he announced, of course, he came down the escalators, as everybody knows. When he finished his announcement, he got on a plane, flew up to Manchester, New Hampshire, and I introduced and endorsed him at the Manchester Community College, which made me the first person. I know that there were others who endorsed him later in the day in South Carolina and Iowa, but he came to New Hampshire first, and I endorsed him there, and then, of course, he went on to win New Hampshire in the primary, which, and the rest is history. He just kept growing. His popularity kept growing. The movement behind the president kept growing because he had a message that resonated with the entire country. And it was a very important message, and the message, of course, was let's make America great again. And as you know, he has done a phenomenal job to date in accomplishing that. He's one of those rare people who thinks that when you actually make a promise to people, you have to keep it. And he has worked very hard to keep so many promises that he made on the campaign trail, and I'm just so excited that he's running again for president. Of course, I'm in a sort of a unique position because as state party chair, we've got a couple of other minor candidates who are considering, unfortunately, running against the president. So I have to remain neutral, but again, I can talk about 2016 and the phenomenal race that was run by a very tight group of people. We didn't have a big staff, but we had a lot of energy, and a lot of people worked very hard to get Donald J. Trump elected President of the United States. And I'm so excited that he's running for re-election, and I think when he wins, he's going to finish fulfilling all the promises that he made, and it's going to be phenomenal for the country going forward.
Well, Steve, that's why we're here in New Hampshire, and why I wanted to have you on. Steve Stepanek with us, House of Representatives member from Amherst, New Hampshire, also the first person elected official as a representative of the State House in New Hampshire to back Trump. And, of course, after the president announced in coming down the escalator, the first trip he made was to Manchester, New Hampshire, and Steve was there, endorsed him, and introduced him. So you go back a long time. That was, I think, June of 2015. Also, the house party is a funny story. I kind of remember you doing that, and I also remember that he did one and he couldn't do them anymore because you couldn't have 300 people. You had to have 3,000, then 30,000. So it grew.
Oh, it was just incredible.
By a lot since your first house party.
Yeah,
I know, since your first meet and greet.
The next event, the first event we did, one of the first events we did after he announced was in Laconia, New Hampshire, and we had gotten a American Legion Hall, which held about 600 people, and 2,000 showed up, and it was like pandemonium. So it was just every event, every venue that we did, double, triple the number of people would show up that the event would hold, and it was just amazing to see the people who would come out to these rallies. One of the most amazing things to me was the number of people who came out who would say, and I was on the ground working like the county fairs, the old home days, in my little booth, handing out, along with a lot of volunteers, handing out signs and bumper stickers, and I had hundreds upon hundreds of people, average Americans, good, hard-working, blue-collar Americans, coming up to me saying, I've never voted. How can I register to vote so I can vote for Donald Trump? He brought so many people into the political process for the first time because he had a message that resonated with him. He was not the typical politician with a bunch of promises that were never going to be kept. And people trusted Donald Trump to do what he said he was going to do. And that's exactly what he's done. And that's why he's going to win re-election, is because he is fulfilling the promises that he made. And it's very exciting to see it happen. It was very exciting to be on the ground with him in those early days. And those are tough days. I mean, I had one of my fellow reps actually gave me a business card for a psychiatrist when I first endorsed him, because he said, Stepanek, you need help, in backing Donald Trump. But so we took a lot of hits early on, but at the end of the day, we prevailed because we had an individual who had the right message, who resonated with the core of America.
Well, I tell you what, it was quite the campaign, and we all look back on it. It's kind of fun to reminisce with people that, like you and I, that were there from the very, very beginning, and how fun it was. And we're going to be doing a tribute to a fellow by the name of Jack Davis later on in this week. Jack Davis from Buffalo, New York, from upstate New York, was really the forerunner to the whole Trump campaign. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the week. But Steve, I tell you what, it was a fun time and it was exciting. And of course, we had to do battle with all the never Trumpers, many of them that now serve in the administration, which was amazing. You battle with people and then they end up serving the president in some capacity. So that's probably one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced in my life. The number of never Trumper haters that end up in some prominent role in the administration. John Bolton, one of them, and many, many others. Cuccinelli, who was on TV yesterday, who I battled hand-to-hand combat for basically 12 months. And so it's kind of interesting. But, Steve, look, I want to talk about how does Trump win New Hampshire in 2020? Tell us about the loss in 2016, I think 2,700 votes. And we just had Steve Bannon on. He said you guys got screwed there because people were coming in from Massachusetts same-day registration or something. Explain that, and how will that be different?
Well, I mean, there are a number of factors. Obviously, there was a huge turnout in New Hampshire. There always is, but we had a number of factors working against us. First of all, we had a never Trumper who was in charge of the state party at the time, which was Jennifer Horn, who was doing everything within her power, even after the election. After the convention in July of 2016, when President Trump was the nominee, and she was actively working against his election as the state party chairman, which presented some huge obstacles for us. And of course, we had a sitting U.S. Senator who was running for re-election, Kelly Ayotte, who I've supported Kelly in the past. I have a lot of respect for Kelly, but she at the time took the stand and actually publicly said to the world, "I will not vote for Donald Trump. I will write in Mike Pence's name." And so we were fighting internally people who within our own party. So not only were we fighting Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, we were also fighting, the establishment. Jennifer Horn and Kelly Ayotte in the Republican Party here in New Hampshire. So that presented some obstacles because we weren't all in the same boat rowing in the same direction. And it made it very difficult on the ground as far as the whole ground game. And I think, Kelly lost by just 1,200 votes and the president lost by 2,700 votes. And I think if they had been all working together instead of against each other, and we weren't working against them, but they were working against the president, I think Kelly would still be a U.S. Senator, and I think that President Trump would have won in New Hampshire. So I think we do not have that situation now. Obviously, as chairman of the party, I will be supporting our nominee, which will be ultimately President Trump. And the entire organization that we're building here in New Hampshire is going to be supporting the entire Republican ticket from the president all the way down to county commissioners, which is very important. We've been building, which the state party, when I took over back in January 26th, I was elected as the chairman of the party. And our goal is to build a strong grassroots organization, which is something that the state party has never done here in New Hampshire. So we're building out town committees. We're building out a grassroots organization. We're training people. We've reached out and had tremendous support from the RNC. They've put ground people earlier than ever before here in New Hampshire as far as field operatives and ground people. We've got a communications person full time on the ground from the RNC. We've got which supplements our communications people. We have a state director. We've got a data person. We've got field operatives. So we've got a huge force already on the ground, both from the RNC and which supplements the state party organization. And they're working hand-in-hand, coordinated effort, which we didn't have in 2016. We're out there actively IDing voters and re-engaging voters. I think that we're going to have an effort that's a coordinated effort with the entire party in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. And I think we're going to have a very successful 2020 election here in New Hampshire, which will elect the president and Republicans all up and down the ticket here in New Hampshire. So we're pretty excited about what's going on. We're excited about the momentum. We're excited about the people who are turning out. And, of course, the president coming here to New Hampshire only magnifies that tenfold. The level of excitement has just been absolutely amazing here in New Hampshire and across the New England area. I mean, we're getting just thousands of people from Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut and even Vermont who want to see the president, who want to be involved in the president. And I know that a lot of times the mainstream, if you want to call them that, media will criticize, all these are just, big events. He's nothing but, a rock star. These people aren't going to vote for him, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll never forget, we did back in 2015, we did an event, late 2015, down in Lowell, Massachusetts, where we had over 10,000 people show up for an event. And it was cold. It was I think 5 degrees with a stiff wind, so we had a below zero wind chill factor, and people were waiting literally 3 or 4 hours in line to go through the megs to get into the hall down in Lowell. And we were out there as volunteers with, passing out coffee. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts did well by us because we had so many big jugs of coffee just to keep the people warm. And I'll never forget, a reporter came up to me after the event and said, well, this was a great event. You had, 11,000 people, but, hey, he's a rock star. This is just, they're not going to come out and vote for him. And I looked at the guy and I said, you've got people who just spent 5 hours in sub-zero weather waiting to listen to this person, and you don't think they're going to spend 5 minutes going into a voting booth and vote for this man? You're absolutely crazy. And we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see the same level of enthusiasm. It hasn't gone away. His supporters are still out there, and they're going to be out in droves, not only to see him, but more importantly, to vote for him. And that's what we're excited about.
Well, you got that nailed. And, Steve, you're going to make a huge difference as the chairman of the Republican Party in New Hampshire. I think you're going to bring it home for Trump in 2020. That's why we're here. It is absolutely critical that President Trump carries New Hampshire in 2020, and that's one of the states they're expanding. And based on what happened in 2016, you only lost by 2,700 votes, but you had dissension in the party. You had a bunch of never-Trumpers. Kelly Ayotte wouldn't back the president. Running for Senate, you didn't get together. You had all kinds of issues that you are going to fix this year, and you're not going to have. You can get everybody in lockstep. I think you win. I think you win for Trump. I think you win for your Senate candidate, whoever that may be. I'm for Corey Lewandowski, obviously. You have to stay neutral. But look, Steve.
That's a tough race because I have two of my best friends potentially running against each other. Of course, Corey hasn't announced. But I'm very close with Bill. I'm very close with Corey. General Bolduc is another candidate who's already announced, and he's another quality candidate. So we're going to have 3, potentially 4 very good candidates who are going to be running in a primary. And ultimately, I think whoever wins the primary, and I can't take sides at this point, is going to beat Jean Shaheen because I think she's very weak in the state. She hasn't done anything for the state. She's all she's done is followed whatever Chuck Schumer has told her to do. She actually was one of those senators, Democratic senators, who voted against the bill to protect born children, and she voted, and as I say, she voted to murder born children, and that's a terrible thing, and I don't care where you stand on whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. Once a child is born, regardless of the circumstances, that child is now a human being, and I don't care what what law you're following or what belief you have. I happen to believe.
Well, that whole abortion in the birth canal thing is just sick. Steve, I'm out of time, man. I got to go. Steve Stepanek, he's the chairman of the Republican Party in New Hampshire. He's fired up. He's going to bring it home for Trump in 2020 and for the Republican candidate to defeat Jeanne Shaheen for the U.S. Senate. Steve, thanks for being with us. I'll see you later on this week. We're live in Manchester, John Fredericks Radio Network. Stay with us. I'll be right back.